Donald Trump visits the Victoria Nursing Center for his charity drive, but what unfolds next is a simple yet profound gesture that will change the way you view your relationships with loved ones. It was just another day at Victoria Nursing Center, a place where time seemed to stand still for its elderly residents. News spread quickly, though, when a wave of Secret Service agents arrived, preparing for a visit from a notable guest, Donald Trump. With his presence, a slight shift in the atmosphere occurred. For many of the residents, it had been far too long since someone had come to offer more than just the usual care. It was a rare moment of excitement, the chance for a brief connection. As Trump moved from room to room bringing small tokens of comfort, one resident caught his attention, a woman talking to the walls as though speaking to a long-lost loved one. Her sorrowful words struck a chord with him. "You'll get everything you deserve, honey," she murmured, her voice heavy with a heartbreaking sense of longing. Though spoken to no one, her words echoed a deep yearning for connection. This was unlike anything Donald Trump had encountered. He thought of his own children, and for a moment he imagined himself in a similar situation. An emotional drift took him away from his usual thoughts. He quickly turned to the Victoria Nursing Center owner and asked, "What's the problem here?" The staff member replied, "Nothing. She's just an old soul, spending her days hoping her daughter will visit her soon." As he stood there, watching the woman, Trump's thoughts momentarily shifted away from any political agenda. What mattered now was the raw truth of human connection, the simple yet profound realization that love and family are what people truly need. He quickly asked the Victoria Nursing Center's staff what was wrong, feeling the weight of the moment. He calmly knocked on the door and, offering a warm smile, said, "Hello there. Is it all right if I join you for a moment?" The center staff exchanged puzzled glances as Trump's tone softened. One of them whispered, "This is different. Is he okay?" Some staff members were moved by his approach, while others remained wary, unsure of how genuine his change in demeanor really was. A mix of confusion, curiosity, and hope filled the room, adding depth and complexity to the atmosphere. Margaret looked up and immediately recognized Donald Trump. "Oh, Mr. President." "Yes, for sure," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face, reflecting the loneliness she had felt for so many years. Trump stepped into the room and paused, taking in the surroundings with a calm, respectful demeanor. Without speaking, he moved closer to her chair and gently adjusted her blanket. He didn't rush to speak. His presence alone was a comfort. As he sat beside her, he made soft, brief eye contact, allowing her to feel at ease. His body language was open and attentive, silently signaling that he was there to listen. He kept looking for a moment, and the atmosphere of the Victoria Nursing Center shifted, with everyone silently wondering what would happen next. After a brief pause, Donald Trump cleared his throat and asked, "May I ask how old you are?" Margaret, with a confused smile, responded, I'll be 80 this year." Those present in the room couldn't help but appreciate the awkwardness of the situation. No one had ever seen someone like Donald Trump so caught in such an uncomfortable moment. Realizing the shift, Trump quickly made another attempt, saying, "Sorry if I came on too strong. I'm just amazed by how strong you've been." There was a sincerity in his voice that brought tears to the woman's eyes again. She softly replied, "Is it? I've been doing worse. I keep talking to the walls as if my daughter is standing right here." Donald Trump hadn't expected this revelation, and for a brief moment, he was caught off guard. But his experience with people who had endured emotional suffering during his time as president helped him recover quickly. He leaned in closer and gently said, "It's okay to imagine the good things. A lot of people do that to feel closer to their loved ones." Trump listened to the woman's words, her pain hanging heavy in the air. He didn't respond immediately, but paused to reflect. He thought of his own mother, the way he'd cared for her in her final years, the quiet moments of empathy that spoke louder than any grand gestures. Slowly, he reached out, offering comfort through his presence, understanding that sometimes words weren't enough. Donald Trump quickly asked, "May I know what's going on?" The woman paused her crying and replied, "If I tell you, you'll probably forget me by tomorrow." She was acutely aware of how people like him, with their wealth and gifts, often forget those they encounter, moving on with their lives as if they had never existed. As Margaret began sharing her story, the Victoria Nursing Center staff exchanged uneasy glances. One nurse murmured, "She's been through so much. I think we should give her some space," while another quietly wiped away a tear. The staff's reactions were divided. Some were deeply moved by the woman's words, while others seemed eager to move on, feeling that nothing could truly change for her. The head of the staff politely suggested to Donald Trump, "I think we should leave her alone. Let's move to the next patient, sir." Her words lingered in the air, but Trump didn't respond as expected. Despite the request, he raised a hand in a stop motion and said, "I can't imagine what you're going through, but sharing your story might help ease some of that burden." This shift caught everyone off guard. No one expected a wealthy man, with so many other things to do, to patiently wait for someone to share their story. Even Margaret seemed momentarily confused. After a pause, she replied, "You're right. Talking to the walls made me look like a maniac. I might need to share my sorrows with a real person." Her understanding of the situation impressed Trump. He realized right away that she had led a remarkable life. But today wasn't the day to delve into that. Today was about offering comfort. Trump settled in beside her and said, "Great. Let's get started with your story. What happened?" After a brief pause, Margaret began, "Well, I'm Margaret, and I was a neuroscientist in my early life. An accomplished one, too." Donald Trump was taken aback by this revelation, as were the staff members present. It was the first time they had heard this, and Trump couldn't help but reflect on the irony of life. One moment, you're a respected neuroscientist. The next, you're in a Victoria Nursing Center with no one to look forward to. With a mix of curiosity and anxiety, he asked, "Really? That sounds impressive. How did you end up here?" Margaret let out a sad laugh as she shared her truth. "I had a beautiful child. She was an angel. I did everything I could to keep her happy. I remember the last day she left my apartment and never came back." Her words carried a deep emotion, and soon every staff member at the Victoria Nursing Center could feel the weight of her pain. The manager, visibly moved, said, "I can't even imagine living my life without my kids, especially when I've done everything for them." Donald Trump, too, thought about the days he worked hard to bring joy to his own family, but the thought that one day they might leave him saddened him deeply. He quickly asked, "Where did she go? And how did you end up here?" Margaret looked back at him and replied, "Oh no, she doesn't even know I'm here. Being a scientist can mess with your mind. It happened to me too. One day I was just in my apartment, and my neighbors brought me here because there was no one else to contact." Donald Trump, intrigued, asked, "Why didn't you reach out to your daughter again?" Margaret replied, "Oh, I did, but she looked so happy with her family. I didn't want to shatter that." The room was filled with a mix of emotions as everyone struggled to comprehend the depth of a mother's selflessness. Despite missing her daughter dearly, she chose not to disrupt her happiness by sharing the pain she was enduring. Donald Trump, moved by her words, said, "But you should tell her. She deserves to know the truth." Margaret got sad. She didn't have nerves to speak to her daughter. Realizing her reluctance, Donald Trump gently asked, "Do you have a way to reach your daughter?" His tone was soft but deliberate, giving the woman space to decide. He wasn't asking to be her hero. He was simply offering a hand, an opportunity for her to make the connection she so desperately needed. Margaret searched her purse and found a paper where she wrote her phone number. Donald Trump picked up his phone, and without any hesitation, he called her daughter. After a few failed tries, the call was answered, and Donald Trump said, "I'm here with someone very special who misses you more than you know." Margaret seemed momentarily lost in disbelief, her eyes wide with joy at the realization that her daughter was on the phone. Trembling with excitement, she quickly reached for the handset, her hands shaking slightly as she brought it to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice trembling with both nerves and happiness. Hearing her daughter's voice for the first time in years, a radiant smile spread across her face, and her eyes filled with tears. She spoke with a mix of excitement and emotion, sharing how much she had missed her and finally opening up about the loneliness she had endured. Her tone shifted from sadness to joy as the conversation unfolded, each word lifting the weight she had carried for so long. Donald Trump stood quietly to the side, watching the interaction with a calm, reflective expression. When the call began to wind down, he gently took the phone back and said, "You should see her in person. Margaret's a wonderful mother, and I promise you'll want to be part of her life again." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Margaret's daughter agreed to see her as soon as possible. The room seemed to exhale in relief and hope, the moment hanging in the air like a fragile but beautiful promise. As the call ended, Margaret sat back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the phone. The weight of the years seemed to lift off her shoulders in that instant. Her face, once weary and lined with sorrow, now glowed with an expression of joy and hope that had been absent for so long. The staff at the Victoria Nursing Center, who had been quietly observing the exchange, couldn't help but smile at the unexpected turn of events. The Victoria Nursing Center staff shared a moment of quiet reflection. Some smiled softly, moved by Margaret's renewed hope, while others remained still, as if processing the profound emotional shift that had just taken place. A nurse quietly remarked, "I never thought I'd see this," while another wiped away a tear, grateful to witness such a raw human moment. "You did this," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "You brought her back to me." Donald Trump, with a somber nod, responded, "I just gave you the chance to talk to her. You've always had that connection." As the room settled into a peaceful silence, a few of the Victoria Nursing Center staff gathered their phones and captured the poignant moment. They recorded her face, the joy and relief radiating from her as she spoke to her daughter, a moment of connection after years of longing. It was a simple act, nothing grand or monumental, but it resonated deeply with everyone present. After a moment of peace, Trump gave Margaret a small, quiet smile. He didn't linger for thanks or recognition. Instead, he stood, gently patting her hand before quietly stepping out of the room. He didn't need words to express his respect or gratitude. His departure was understated, leaving the room with the same silent dignity that had marked his time there. As he walked down the hall, he allowed the emotional moment to settle, letting Margaret have the space to reflect on her connection with her daughter. As Trump left the building, the staff and residents remained in the room, quietly processing what had just unfolded. Margaret, still seated in her chair, gazed out the window as the soft glow of the evening light illuminated her face. For the first time in years, her thoughts weren't clouded by loneliness, but filled with the hope of rekindled love and connection. She whispered softly to herself, "Maybe this time, it will be different." The staff, moved by the simplicity of the moment, stepped away to give her the privacy she deserved. In the quiet solitude of her room, Margaret's heart felt lighter, as though a weight she had carried for decades had been lifted. Trump's visit, though brief, had reminded her of the strength within herself, a strength she had forgotten in the years of longing. It wasn't the grand gestures that mattered, but the quiet moments of understanding that brought her back to life. As the evening settled into night, Margaret sat alone with her thoughts, holding on to the hope of seeing her daughter once more. A faint smile played on her lips as she closed her eyes, cherishing the warmth of the moment. If this story touched your heart, imagine the impact you could make by reaching out to someone in need. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.